spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with the Scariest Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Rob Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we're here with a few more pastas, creepy pastas, that is. Not delicious ones that you could have for dinner, even though that sounds real fucking good right now.
That'd be nice, because I'm pretty hungry right now. This is the part where I tell you what creepypastas are. Creepypastas are these short, fictional horror stories that are on the internet in various different places. Places like Creepypasta, that's a website. Mm-hmm. There's also places like the SCP Foundation, which is what I think we did last time we did a Pastatime. And then folks actually send us some that they have written themselves, some short fictional stuff that's horror element, horror themed, I guess I should say, that they've decided they wanted to share with us and have us read on the show. Robin, for folks who had a story like that, or maybe just a suggestion of what we could read, where can they send that?
You can send it to pastatime@scarish.com, or just go to our website, scarish.com. There's a contact us page. You fill out all that fun stuff, and it gets emailed to us that way. Yeah. Oh, and social media. We have a lot of social media. So, I mean, not a lot, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So, right on. That's what we're going to be doing tonight. We have 4, including 1, sent in from a very special listener. So, pretty excited to get to that. I believe Robin, however, is going to be going first. So
yes, let me go first.
Take it away.
All right. So my stories today are going to be like main story and then like a sequel that's kind of goes off of the main story. So that's just prepping you for what my stuff is going to be.
So your first story is like number 1, and then your second one's like the second installment.
Kind of, yes. All right. So the first story I'm going to read here is called The Theater, and it begins... Have you ever heard of an old PC game called The Theater?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't think so. This author totally knows what's up, right? Except there
he predicted this conversation.
But, well, it could be a she. It's
true.
Anonymous.
They predicted this conversation.
But there is a theater rhythm game. Have you ever played Theater Rhythm? It's like a Final Fantasy rhythm game for DS that came out. It was fun.
Isn't it called like Final Fantasy
Theater Rhythm?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Probably, the story continues, probably because many people say it doesn't even exist. You see, The Theater is an old computer game released around the same time as Doom. Today, if you ever find it, it's only available on crappy bootleg CD-ROMs, which, more often than not, don't actually contain the game.
I will say, I remember when Doom came out, and I'm pretty sure I had to install it across like 27 3.5 floppy disks onto my computer, because I don't think CD-ROM drives were at least readily and widely available yet when Doom actually released. So
I didn't play like computer games that intense until I probably bought an Xbox or something like that. Or no, my friends had Xboxes, the OG Xbox, which is, 20th anniversary for Xbox, right? And that's the first time I ever played intense games. Other than, Nintendo, whatever.
I'm trying to see, I'm going through my memory because I remember it was Wolfenstein, then it was Doom, then it was Duke Nukem. And I'm trying to remember which of those wound up being on CDs. So either way, let's go ahead and continue with this story.
Okay.
I'm just old.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't consider, the Nintendo games I played, like Mortal Kombat and stuff like that, intense games. To me, intense games is like when I first played Halo. So Doom, I never played Doom. I never played anything intense on my computer. Played fucking, what is that, Oregon Trail.
That shit's intense? All your friends die?
That's what I played on PC. So having to install something on 1 million discs, don't know what that feels like. Or floppy discs.
Fucking nuts. I mean, it was the 3.5.
CD-ROMs, I remember.
They were the hard ones. It wasn't the true floppies. We just called them floppies. But yeah, it's nuts.
All right, so... The actual legitimate copies that they say were released back in the day feature a blank cover with nothing but the sprite of what has since been named the Ticket Taker. He is simply a poorly drawn, pixelated Caucasian bald man with large red lips wearing a red vest over a white shirt and black pants. Seems like typical...
ticket booth guy?
Carnival, ticket booth taker dude. All right. He is completely emotionless, though some say that if you smash the disc, his face is shown as angry the next time you look at the cover.
Oh, thank God.
But this is just dismissed as an urban myth. What is peculiar about the theater, though, is that there is no developer named on the jewel case, nor a game description on the back. It is simply the ticket taker on a white backdrop on both sides. Sounds like somebody decided to make their own game and
Who
make
wouldn't
whatever.
take credit for a game they made?
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
It's a lot of work.
The game was initially known for its inability to install correctly.
Like every PC game from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, it probably took like 1,000,001 fucking discs.
And they
right?
always somehow failed. There was a corrupted file and you had to do it again.
The only thing I remember is Final Fantasy VII being like 7 fucking discs or something. 6 discs.
Yeah. I can't remember how many it was because I only played through the first disc. When I got to the second one,
Were you
I'm pretty sure
fuck this?
I had borrowed it from a friend who was playing it through, and they were on the second disc. And they're like, when you get to the second disc, let me know and I'll give it to you. And I got to it, and we just never made the exchange. So I think I gave him the first disc back, but I can't quite remember. It's been 25 years.
Oh my god. Yeah, I freaking loved Final Fantasy, but so many discs. So many discs. And now you can play that game just downloading it, right? Installing it.
Yep.
Final Fantasy.
I have it on my PC.
Remake or whatever. Okay. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Anyway, the installation process immediately locks up the computer when the user reaches the licensing agreement. Also strange about the licensing agreement for the theater is that whenever the development studio is supposed to be named, the text is simply a blank line. Anyways, most people who have claimed to own one of the original CDs say that they figured out how to install the game by simply rebooting their computer on the licensing agreement with the disc still inside. Then they are prompted to press I agree on startup. Then they continue with the installation. The game starts up without any introduction besides a main menu that is simply the sprite of a movie theater's exterior on an empty city street. The title fades in, and then the 3 menu buttons, New Game, Load, and Options, show up. Selecting Options immediately crashes the game to the desktop. Load is said not to function at all, even if you do have a saved game. Nothing happens when you press it. Thus, New Game is the only working menu option.
What I love about this horror short fiction is they're describing actual things that used to happen all the time with PC games.
Oh my god.
And kind of just games in general.
Once it is selected, you are in the first-person view. You're standing in an empty movie theater lobby with the exception of the ticket taker standing in front of a dark hallway, which one can only assume leads to the theater themselves. There's nothing to do but look at the poorly drawn, mostly illegible movie posters to approach the ticket taker. Once the player moves towards the ticket taker, a very low-quality sound clip plays saying, "Thank you, please enjoy the movie," along with a speech box saying the same thing. You then walk into the hallway and the screen fades to black and you're in the empty lobby and you do the exact thing again and again and again. While this may sound like a really horrible game, a number of peculiar things occurs as you continue to play it. The number of times that you have to continue into the hall after giving your ticket to the ticket taker before the strange events happen is unknown, so you just keep doing it until something happens. Most state that it's completely random and could take anywhere from the first playthrough to the 400th. What happens, though, has deeply disturbed some players. The first occurrence is when the player fades back in after walking into the hallway. This time, they will notice the ticket taker is completely absent. The player then, without any other options, decides to walk into the dark hallway. Bad decisions. The sound clip and text box mentioned previously still play in the absence of the ticket taker, but when the player walks into the hallways, the screen does not fade out. It goes pitch black as they walk deeper into the hall, but the player's footstep sound clip is still playing as they continue to push the up button on their keyboard. So forward, you just keep walking forward, right?
I'm pretty impressed that this game has footstep sounds.
Those claiming to have played the original game report to have felt extremely uncomfortable walking down the hallway, anticipating the whole way something horrible happening. Well, eventually the player is unable to move forward. There's nothing for a few moments before a strange sprite that is described as the ticket taker, but with a swirl for a face, appears and stands before the player. The original players of the game say their bodies immediately froze up and their stomachs churned when they saw this sprite, which has been appropriately named the Swirly Head Man. It reminds me of the Mr. Smiley from Haunting at Hill House.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing happens as the Swirly Head Man stands before them. Then, suddenly, a piercing screech plays as the game glitches out. This lasts for a few minutes with the screeching continuous. Then the player is abruptly returned to the lobby with all the sounds and graphics being as they should be. I am one of those people that loud, sharp sounds like that in scary movies and stuff freak me out. So imagine playing this game and then that happens to you and you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
You know you're watching a truly scary movie when you're not scared by the score in the background. You know, like sharp strings out of nowhere from Dead Silence making you jump, or like that sort of thing. When it's something that's actually happening where you're like, oh, fuck that. Like, that's a scary movie. Because I think that's just a cheap trick that a lot of movies like to use.
All right. The game continues normally for the next couple of cycles of entering the hallway, with a couple of the original players claiming that the swirly head man would briefly appear and disappear in the corner of the screen as a brisk yelp sound effect plays. A yelp. I'm trying to think. Probably like when you accidentally step on
Lego.
Yeah, or something sharp. Or stub your toe or something. Then at some point after meeting the swirly head man, the player sees the ticket taker pacing back and forth, though there is no walking animation. So how do they...
It's like they're levitating back and forth?
Okay.
That's what I'm picturing, at least.
The sprite's limbs are completely static, so you're right. So he just hops up and down slightly as a substitute, with his eyes being wide and his mouth open to simulate a worried facial expression. Some players noted that the movie posters had been replaced with images of the swirly head man, which caused them to immediately turn their character's head away from the posters and approach the ticket taker, because you're too scared to look at the posters, so you're just like, fuck this.
Okay.
That's like me playing a regular horror game.
Yeah, that's true.
Then another different low-quality sound clip plays, but the speech box contains nothing but corrupted characters that cause whatever text that would have been in the box to be completely illegible. Due to the extremely low quality of the sound, it is debated by players what exactly the ticket taker says at this point, though it is widely agreed that he says, "Never reach the other levels."
That's pretty fucking creepy.
Then the screen fades out once again and returns the player back to their starting point in the lobby, but the ticket taker is gone and the hallway is blocked by a large brick wall sprite. So it's like there's no way to walk anymore. Touching the brick wall will immediately crash the game, and that's all there is to it. No one knows what the quote-unquote other levels are, or how to gain access to them, nor is it known why the swirly headman causes such acute fear in those who have seen him in the game. All the original copies of the theater have either been lost or destroyed, but the creepiest part is the fact that all the original players of the game claim to occasionally see a brief glimpse of the swirly headman out of the corner of their eyes. Fuck that. I definitely see some stuff though after playing like scary games and things like that. There was a story that I read before where it was like an AR game, an AR horror game, where they set up the AR game to like work throughout their house, and then like there's a woman in the game, which is probably the villain of the game, you know, some scary horror
sounds like that
person, and then
thing from the Exorcist TV show, or
and Evil. Then it starts coming out into reality.
Evil, that's the name of that TV show, I think.
It's so good. That show is very good. But yeah, so I'm totally down with this game.
What I really like about this is it 100% sounds plausible. It absolutely sounds like something that probably could have existed, and may have actually existed, and that's why like there's this like local legend where someone decided they're going to write this up, which I think is fantastic. It's super well done. It's very detailed, and it really evokes all the nostalgia of the old games. Like when you said there was a brick sprite blocking the hallway, like I can picture that perfectly in my head. And it almost to me sounds like something where someone had this idea to make it a game, and then it's just like, nah, let's just go ahead and write a creepypasta about it. Either way, I thought this was super good, and I'm excited to hear the sequel that you're going to be reading later. So good stuff. And when you mention like seeing stuff because you've played a game before, like out of the corner of your eye, when Warcraft 3, the real-time strategy game came out, I played for like 48 hours straight. I loved it so much. I was playing as night elves. When you're a night elf, your buildings are trees. And if you get attacked, they can uproot themselves and defend, not just your army defends. You can actually have your trees themselves defend. So I used to do this thing where I'd build a bunch of super strong buildings, and then I'd uproot them and walk them across the map, and I'd fight with them too.
What the what?
Because it was something you could do. And I remember we went out, and I mean, this was maybe on junior, senior year in high school. And we went out to a town that was like 45, 60 minutes away, somewhere like that. My friend was going to go hang out with his girlfriend. And like we got out of the car and I'm so tired, and you're already just like sort of like blurrily seeing everything.
Yeah.
And there's a tree next to me and I could have sworn it shifted. I was like, holy fuck. Like, what just happened? Like, get me inside right now. So it definitely sounds like something that's plausible.
Wow, nice.
But good stuff. I liked it. All right, let's go ahead and move into the next story. This one is from a wonderful listener, and they put this preface in here. I think it was just for us. It doesn't say it's just for you, so I'm going to read it so that everyone can hear it, because I think it's nice. And it starts out like this with the message to us. Hello, Spooky Crew. Adam, Robin, and Spooky Mom.
Hello.
I have a short-ish story that I would like to share with you guys and the pod. I've been trying my hand at short horror stories, which is kind of out of my realm. It's meant to resemble someone's inner monologue as they question the world around them. Let me know what you think, and feel free to read on the pod. This is called Look, Listen, Notice. Spooky friend, Claire. All right, well, Claire, thank you so much for sending that in. Let's dive into it. Is this blood mine, or is it the trees?
According to Adam's Warcraft 3 history, it's the trees.
It could
Because
be.
he's a fucking monster.
It says, wait, no, trees don't bleed. Do I bleed?
They do in Warcraft
Have to keep
3.
running. How long have I been running? Keep going. Where was I when the sun rose? Maybe if I keep running, I'll reach the sea. The trees part and present a small clearing. Safety, respite. Slow your pace, let your feet drag. Stop. Look. Is it safe? Listen. Is it quiet? Notice. Is there anything out of place? No. Okay. Take a cautious step forward. 1, 2...
What's with your voice?
Darkness, and then light. How long have I been here? I'm not sure. It feels like a few minutes. No, hours. Days? Yes, a few days. That's right. I've been staying here, haven't I? Yes. These walls make me uncomfortable. They're so white. It feels like a ward. But this chair, it's so soft, so comfortable. It reminds me of home somehow, as though it's sat in the corner my whole life. I could sit here forever. But that hum, it slices through me. What is it? This deep, low hum, like road noise when you're riding in the passenger seat. Watch the road fly by as it lulls you to sleep. Is it night? It looks like night through the window, but where was I when the sun rose? How long have I been here? When was the last time I saw the sunrise? This chair is so comfortable. This sounds like the inner monologue of me when I'm like real fucked up. All right.
Is that your inner monologue when you're fucked up?
And sometimes I'm like questioning everything around me, but noticing how comfortable the chair is that I'm sitting in.
Okay. Usually I start crying.
Yep. Am I being watched? Turn around slowly and look over your shoulder. Yes, I am, but it's just her looking at me from the other side of the counter. She's smiling at me. I like that she always smiles. It's safety, respite. Maybe I'll ask her for breakfast later, but I'm not hungry now. When was the last time I ate? I'm not sure, but this chair is far too comfortable to get up now. I think I might stay a while longer. These yellow walls remind me of home. How long has she been watching me? Where did these clothes come from? Oh, my luggage, of course. I packed them. These pajamas are so comfortable, especially the slippers. Where did I leave my luggage? That's right, I left it by the door. Where's the door? Wait, weren't these walls yellow? No, they've always been blue. When was the last time I ate? I'm not hungry. How long have I been here? This chair is so soft. What the fuck is happening? How long have I been here? How long? When was the last time the sun rose? Use your voice. Excuse me, miss. How long have I been here? Did she hear me? Maybe if I get up. How long have I been here? The wooden floor sighed under my weight as if it hadn't been stepped on in years. Miss? The carpeted floor muffled my footsteps. How long have I been here? It's a little weird that such a nice house would have dirt floors. I wish that hum would go away. It feels so much louder now. Is this person like in the electrical chair? I have so many theories running through my head.
This person is the trees.
What would you like for breakfast? Her words cut into my ears like a knife. Her voice was so sharp. Had she even spoken to me before? When was the last time I heard another voice or even used my own? I wouldn't mind some pancakes, I said. Okay, it's official. This story is about me fucked up. I love me some pancakes.
Me too.
Perfect. They'll be ready in a flash. She made no movement. How long, I asked? Why don't you have a seat? They'll be ready soon.
Maybe it's like a San Junipero type thing where it's all in your mind.
Still smiling, she gestured to a deep green recliner in the center of the room. It looked so inviting. Turn back around. How long? I repeated. Have a seat, she smiled. Stop. Look, is it safe? Pink is my favorite color. How lucky that the walls are painted that shade. How long? I asked, her head cocked to the side. Listen, is it quiet? The humming is so loud now, like a swarm of angry bees. Suddenly a crash, a crumpling of metal, the most vile scraping. Silence, then replaced by a ticking clock. How long? Her eyes and smile widened unnaturally. Notice. Is anything out of place? Have a seat. That chair. How long have I been here? I turned to look at her, taking one cautious step. She's still fucking smiling, staring at nothing, but she has cracks now, like an old, abused porcelain doll. Why does she have cracks in her face? She sharply jerked her head to face me. Have a seat. It was a plea now. She begged me. Please, how long have I been here? Take another step.
It's a moving tree?
With that, her face began to crumble and fall to the floor, and with it came the facade around me. How long have I... A sudden sharp pain. Blood. Look up. Her face is gone. She has no face. Run. There is no more her, no more room, no more chair. Run. Nothing is kind here. Run. Use the trees for support. Run. Is this blood mine? Do trees bleed? No, trees don't bleed. How long have I been running? If I just keep running, I'll reach the sea. The trees part and present a small clearing. Safety, respite, look, listen, notice. Is it safe? Take a cautious step forward. 1, 2, 3.
Is that it?
That is it. That's the end. So I guess this is a story where you're just destined to not know what's happening and like take it up to interpretation. I'm sure Claire had an idea in her head of what was going on for this person. But I have no clue what was going on. I had a bunch of ideas hoping some of them would be cleared up, but I feel like the more we got a character, the more tangible the surrounding got, the more confused I became because I'm like, okay, cool. So the person's hallucinating or they're in some sort of a mental institution, or maybe this is the final moments before their death, like dragging on a little bit. Maybe they're in a car crash or something like that.
I was thinking that they crashed a car into a tree, and the face that they were seeing of that person in the diner or wherever they were was like their face in the mirror, like the side mirror or something, and it was crumpling or cracked because the side mirror or the rearview mirror was cracked. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just me getting real deep in it, but that's what I thought, and that's why it was like, am I bleeding or are the trees bleeding, you know? And then the whole idea with the trees splitting to a clearing or whatever, maybe it's a cliff or something like that.
The whole running thing and like looking for safety and the trees parting and reaching the sea makes it seem like, is this told from the perspective of an animal? Like, is this Bambi after her mom got shot? But like none of the other stuff makes sense with that. Like there's a chair in the middle of the room.
And the pancakes?
The chair in the middle of the room is like super heavy on symbolism. So I'm like waiting to see what's going to develop from that. So I feel like, I don't know. I have no idea what happened here. But either way, I really did enjoy it. So thank you so much, Claire, for sending that in. So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back.
Alrighty, so the sequel of my story is called The True Story of the Theater.
So the one you read before was bullshit? How dare you, Robin?
Alright.
She just ignores me and moves along.
It goes. It's not something whispered about in certain circles. It's not something that comes in a plain-looking jewel case. It's not by a nameless, untraceable developer, and it's certainly not supernatural. The game in question is indeed called The Theater, R before the E, and was developed by a company called Salida Software. I'm fairly certain it's an English company, despite the Spanish name. As far as I know, all they made was learning software, which is funny because we were just talking about a bunch of learning software. In parentheses, it says, I have a maths suite from them somewhere around here. So, the theater was probably meant to be some sort of edutainment game. That's a pretty fucking good term I've never heard of before. The game was obviously never finished, probably from lack of funding or the whole company going under. I'm loving it. Oh shit. McDonald's sounds good right now too.
It really. I literally just pictured us driving there after the show. That's how hungry I am.
The description in the story is actually pretty accurate. It's in a first-person perspective with flat sprites in a 3D-ish environment, and glitchy as hell. The ticket taker has an egg-shaped body, and one of his hands is huge and misshapen, I think to look like he's reaching towards you for your ticket. The description of the swirly-head man is also accurate, just a glitched version of the ticket taker. But I saw a few people saying that he looks like Gigas?
It's an old video game bad guy.
Oh.
I'm trying to remember
don't
what
know.
series
Never
it's from.
heard of it.
Gigas is like this red swirl. It almost looks like a blood smear, but then it has like a face in the middle of it. And like the thing you can really make out is a mouth. It absolutely has like a mouth of like it's an angry mouth. It has like teeth.
Okay.
That are like rawr.
Like what?
Rawr.
Well, that's not the case. The features of his face are just swirled and are red because his lips are gigantic. I have absolutely no idea why this happens, because while there are a few character sprites in the game's resources, that isn't one of them. Oh, and just to clarify, the sprite is a bit creepy. That's all. It's not terrifying. It's never filled me with a sense of dread. It's just a bit creepy.
I really wonder if the person who wrote the sequel is the same person who wrote the original, or someone read the original and was like, I'm gonna write a sequel where I say everything from the first one is bullshit. Because that seems like a real passive-aggressive, shitty way to write a creepypasta.
The game plays pretty much exactly as stated in the story, so accurately, in fact, that I think the author just downloaded it somewhere and decided to make a scary story of his experiences. I'll admit that some things in it can be unsettling, but not OMG Crappy Pants scary. Like I said, the game is unfinished and very glitchy. Sounds like you're the one that made the game and you're the demon inside.
You're just making up a bunch of fucking excuses right now.
I think the idea is to select a movie from the posters on the wall, enter the theater, and play a minigame. The minigames are glitchy and missing resources to the point of being almost unplayable, but there doesn't seem to be a time limit on any of them. So you just have to plow through until you've done something right enough times to be dumped into the lobby. What's described in the story is what happens if you don't select a movie. You'll be allowed to enter the theater, but since the parameter of which game to load hasn't been set, you'll just be dumped back into the lobby. That's solid logic right there. Here's where it gets a bit weird. If you continue to enter the theater without choosing a movie, odd, sometimes creepy things will happen. I'm not sure why, but if I were to make an educated guess, it would be that glitching past the minigames like this causes variables to each values that they weren't meant to, resulting in things appearing where they shouldn't. Or, the game's just glitched to hell and back. It's been years, but here are some of the effects I can remember. So there's the swirly head man that we heard in the first story, right? Movie posters appearing out of their frame, textures changing color, legitimately disturbing audio issues, other characters, and other areas. The last two are obviously the most interesting ones. Sometimes you'll spawn in a small room with a back floor and green walls, which will crash the game if touched. Sometimes you'll appear in a room similar to the lobby with a concession stand. Kind of. There's a woman behind the counter with an incredibly poorly drawn popcorn machine and soda fountain. But it's all just an image on the wall. It's basically just a big yellow concession stand mural. I don't remember if you can interact with it or not. The only character that appears worth talking about is a guy in a brown jacket, who appears on the sidewalk outside the lobby. Looking back, I don't think the story mentioned this, but to the left of where you start out, the wall is a row of glass doors looking onto the street outside the theater. If you glitch past the minigames enough, a man in a weird-looking jacket, I think it's supposed to be tweed, it's a mess, with a huge smile on his face, will just be standing on the other side of the doors, staring at you. I mean, a huge smile, like Freaky Fred or Spark Brushel.
Who the fuck are they?
Fucking, I don't know. I've never heard of those people. Actually, since he has the same body shape as the ticket taker, he looks a bit like the mayor from The Nightmare Before Christmas. His smile isn't creepy though, it's just broad. What is creepy are his eyes. While the ticket taker, Ashtray, and other sprites will always face you, the smiling guy is anchored in place like one of the walls. His eyes, however, are always staring right at you. Just thinking about that gives me chills. Okay. While there's nothing overtly scary or supernatural about the game itself, that's one thing that I will admit legitimately scares me. Like a porcelain doll. That's pretty much all there is to the theater. If you can find it somewhere, I'd recommend downloading it just to see what it's like. One thing I'd forgotten, as stated in the story, getting the thing to run is, to say the least, difficult. I think someone got a hold of all the code and resources and just compiled it and added their own installer or something. Again, nothing paranormal about the installation. It just doesn't work well. So this person is like...
shitting all over that first story.
Right. But is saying like, the theater is, it's a normal game. It's just a shite game. And there are a bunch of glitches in it. But there are parts about it that kind of freak me out.
One character that's anchored to the ground has eyes that are always following you, and that's scary. It's almost like they decided to retcon the first one and like change stuff, but add stuff in. And I feel like there's a third installment coming that's going to like build off of the second one more than the first one. I don't know. Either way, it's just the concept of a game having like a ghost in the machine is certainly terrifying. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out when the third one releases. So
okay,
good stuff.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get into the last creepypasta of the show, and this one is called String Theory. Starts out like this. Have you ever had an experience that suggested someone else was in your house and just thought, I don't want to know, and left it?
No,
I get sent to investigate every
Yeah.
time. Sometimes, fear of the unknown just seems like the preferable option than facing a real, concrete danger. Normally, it's nothing, though. One time, the beeper function on my wireless house phone went off when I was the only one home. It could only be called from the living room. Another time, I swear someone took change from my desk. They're all probably just slightly disconcerting tricks of the
Rude.
memory. But what would you do when something truly suggestive happens? Would you run or just ignore it like I did?
When I hear suggestive, I think sexy.
Yeah. Last Monday was a normal day. I got up, brushed my teeth, changed into school clothes. All little parts of my morning ritual. It seemed like it would be another totally unnoteworthy day until I saw the strings. There were 3 or 4 thick twine strings in my room. They crisscrossed between the walls around my bed, one attached to the door. No way would I have missed them before. I should have tripped over them. They were tied to pins in the walls, which had also not existed before 10 seconds ago. Nobody could have been in my room while I was in it, let alone set this up. It was early and my brain wasn't processing correctly. I simply discredited the site, untied the strings, and left for school, leaving them balled up on my desk. It didn't get any better later. Outside my house, there were hundreds of them, tied between houses, around cars, across streets. This had to be some super elaborate prank. One of those hidden camera shows or a comedy improv blog. They had gotten everyone else to play along. Passers-by were tangled in them, tying them to objects they were walking towards and away from, as if they had been and were continuing to follow the course laid out for them. I nervously continued my journey to school. On the bus, everyone except me was tied to the door. At school, groups of friends were tied to each other. Teachers were tied to their desks and boards. Oddly enough, at this point, all I could wonder was why I had been left out. When my friend Lucy sat behind me in first period, she simply plonked her bag down on my lap and rested her chin in her hand, looking right past me to the window outside.
So it's like you weren't there at all.
Hey, Lucy. No response. Come on, I didn't expect you to be in on this too. She sighed and started taking books from her bag. All the books were tied to her hands. I grinned and yanked one of the strings off a book. She didn't seem to notice, instead simply disregarded the book completely, letting it drop to the floor without a moment's hesitation. I leaned down, picking up her book, and placed it back on her desk. She took no notice. Well, if that's how we're going to play it. I smiled, trying to look playful, but really just trying to hide my nervousness. I bundled all the strings attached to her together with one hand, then pulled them all free. She blinked, turning to stare at me. Holy crap, Martin, you're like a ninja or something. I've been sitting here for maybe 10 minutes. I smiled again, relieved my friend had finally, quote-unquote, noticed me. Where did all these strings come from, she gasped, seemingly noticing for the first time. I assumed you were all fucking with me. She stood up, backing into a corner. No one else in the class noticed. They weren't here just a minute ago. Do you see them too? Her tone made it clear she was genuinely scared. No, didn't you? I was interrupted by my teacher slamming the door behind her. Everyone except me and Lucy murmured a good morning, and still no one seemed to pay either of us any notice. People have been ignoring me all day, I said to Lucy before turning to our teacher. Hey, dumb bitch, you can't teach for shit.
Sounds like you.
No reaction. I'm getting away from all this shit. Lucy pulled a few strings aside and left the class. I followed and surprise, surprise, no one else noticed. We wandered the corridors, leaving and entering classes as we saw fit. Whenever we untied a chair or a book from someone else, it was like it suddenly didn't matter to them. It didn't exist. I showed her the street outside. There were more strings than when I came in this morning. Twice as many. We carefully picked our way through the tangle, making our way to a nearby coffee shop. Not particularly grand, I know, but what would you do in our situation? As I said, fear of the unknown sometimes seems like the safer option. On a few occasions, I suggested we untie a few more people. Lucy was opposed to it, remembering how terrified she'd been. In the coffee shop, we grabbed a couple of sandwiches and drinks from the fridge. We found a table, that's stealing. We found a table, untied all strings attached to the chairs, and sat down. We both ate in silence, both of us too scared, both of us distracting ourselves by watching strangers in the shop, oblivious to the strings.
All right, I'm down with this story so far.
It's
I'm
fun.
actually interested. I want to know what's going on.
After 20 minutes, Lucy spoke up. Now she's going to take that sandwich, she said, pointing at a woman across the shop. Sure enough, she walked to the fridge and took the plastic wrapped sandwich she was tied to. She pays for it and leaves. She did so, according to the prophecies of the strings. That guy doesn't intend to pay. I watched as a man took his coffee and ran out of the store, the two servers just looking too exasperated to go after him. This is horrible, she whimpered. Let's go, please. Outside wasn't much better. Everyone just followed the strings instructions, going about their daily lives. Lucy announced she was going home to sleep this off, and I agreed to walk her home. She only lived 10 minutes away. Away from the busier part of town, there were fewer strings. It was nicer. We could pretend it wasn't happening. When we turned onto Lucy's street, she stopped, her mouth falling open. What now? I broke the silence, my voice sounding surprisingly small. Look. She pointed outside one of her neighbor's houses. I saw it clearly, and I'll take my memory of that moment till the day I die. A little dark imp, maybe 3 feet tall, walking along with its knuckles on the ground, almost like a monkey. It had 2 bulbous yellow eyes, taking up half its face, and no mouth or any other facial features. It was holding a hammer and a ball of twine, which it was letting out behind it. It walked quickly and quietly from the front door of the house to the mailbox. It stopped, hammered a nail into the side of the box, and tied its string around it. It turned to face us and stopped when it spotted us. My bottom fell out even further than it had already been, which to me sounds like you're shitting your pants. But it just started with a look of surprise and curiosity. You could almost say it was the more frightened one. Suddenly, it beckoned us with its tiny hand. I looked at Lucy, and she hadn't moved. I looked back at the imp, which stared at me. I halved the distance between us, then halved it again. This wasn't fear of the unknown anymore. It was fear of this little guy. Didn't seem like anything to be scared of. When I was a meter away from it, it extended its hand. Hi? I shook it. It nodded in approval, blinking its massively yellow eyes up at me. So you're the ones in charge of the strings. It nodded eagerly. I called Lucy over, but she stayed where she was. There are more of you? Another nod. I wanted to ask it so many questions about what it was and where it came from, but it seemed for now I was stuck with only yes or no questions. Do we even have free will? It just looked at me almost sadly. I immediately felt sick to my stomach and couldn't bear looking at the little monster anymore. I grabbed Lucy, who had been listening to our exchange and now sat on the curb with her head in her hands. Come on. We entered her house and I made her a cup of tea. When I found her in the living room, she had untied her dog and was curled up with it crying. I set the tea down and sat beside her. I'm so scared.
I would do that too, though. If I wound up in that world, I would definitely untie our dog.
I would notice our dog was missing. It would be the one thing that I'd be like, what the fuck is happening? And of course you. I'm so scared, she whispered after a good 10 minutes of sobbing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I'm going to sleep, she mumbled suddenly, and was under within the minute. Sleep was starting to sound pretty good all of a sudden. My eyelids suddenly felt like they were being weighed down. I collapsed to the rug, and the last thing I heard before I fell asleep was the scurrying of several sets of little feet nearby. I felt much better the next day, as if the whole affair had been a dream. I'd probably have believed that if I hadn't been awoken by Lucy's mother that morning, wondering what I was doing sleeping over without permission or something. Over breakfast, Lucy asked me why I looked so pale and nervous. I turned to her and smiled, mumbling something about feeling sick. But the truth was, I was scared because I couldn't see any strings and was wondering whether my actions were truly my own.
The idea that you can't control your own actions is terrifying. The fact that somebody else premeditates all your actions and chooses them for you.
Yeah, what's really funny to me about that story is when we started reading it, or when I started reading it, or whatever, and they talk about there are some folks who it's like, it's better to just not know, like not knowing is the better option.
Yeah.
I've never, ever thought that. I've never thought like not knowing is the better option. I'm just not that kind of person. And when it comes to like the entire theme of the story about like whether or not you have free will or all of your actions are decided, I feel like someone who wouldn't want to know, like ignorance is bliss type of thing, would prefer it if there were strings, because then they don't have to deal with the pressure of ever thinking they'd have to make a decision. The decision is being made by someone else. Therefore, it's someone else's responsibility and someone else's blame. So you never really have to be frozen by anxiety, because you can only just blame someone else rather than actually being empowered by the free will that you may or may not have, according to this story. So it's pretty good, though. I enjoyed it. So thank you to everyone who listened and watched us record this episode live. If you actually don't watch us record live but would like to, you can go to youtube.com/scarish or twitch.tv/scarishpodcast at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And we record Storytime and Pastatime live every Wednesday. If there's ever a deviation we're not recording on a Wednesday, we will let you know in advance on social medias and on the regular shows. But that is our standard time, and we would love to see you. So again, shout out to everyone who was with us tonight and has been listening in podcast form. If you have a if you have a creepypasta you'd like to share with us or suggest we read, please email pastatime@scarish.com or go to our website, scarish.com, and click on Contact Us. You can fill out that form, it comes directly to us, or you can hit us up on any of our social medias. Twitter is @ScarishPod, Instagram is @ScarishPodcast, and Facebook, it's facebook.com/ScarishPodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes. And as Adam, he likes to say that. And if you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. And those are one-time donations. And all your donations go to keeping this podcast going. So we really appreciate everybody that has supported us thus far.
Indeed. Thank you so much. We appreciate every single one of you. We really do. And I think that's everything we have for this episode of Pastatime. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.